All right, so welcome everybody to today's safety roundtable, where we're going to be having a bit of a deep dive into safety technology and, in particular, thinking about AI. Um, we had a session a couple of weeks ago about thinking about the future, and these were two themes that came up quite strongly. So, Martin and I had a chat, and we thought, yeah, let's do a session specifically about these things. So that's the plan for today. Really pleased to be joined by a special guest today. I'll ask Martin to introduce himself in a second. He and I will have a chat through some of the themes and the trends around technology and AI in safety. As always, with the Safety Roundtable, we want this to be interactive, so please feel free to put questions, comments into the chat. And if you're on the Zoom with us live, then do go to reactions, raise your hand, and I'll ask you up and you can come and have a chat with us. Martin and I will chat and then, intervene as you want to, and we'll try and cover this topic as best we possibly can. So, Martin, welcome. Perhaps you could start by just giving a quick introduction to yourself.
Yes, hello to everybody. Name's Martin Rand, obviously, it's on the label, and it's always start a presentation by stating the obvious. I'm a health and safety professional that's been in the game for 30 years. I left my previous employment arena a while ago and actively started looking at health and safety through the eyes of somebody who utilizes AI in some quite detail. And hopefully, what we'll try and do today is to show you some of the pain points that I've experienced, but also to highlight areas that we have found that AI is really beneficial to the safety professional and not only the individuals that are out in the field as well. Okay.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, thanks very much, Martin. So I'm going to make an assumption here that everybody on the call and everybody who's joining us on the replay, etc., sort of knows what AI is. So we won't go into kind of the very basics of what's AI. If you don't know what we mean when we're talking about AI, then have a quick look and come back and join us. So we'll assume you've got that sort of baseline knowledge. And what we thought we'd do, we've kind of partly through looking at questions that were raised when we started advertising this event, we've put together a few themes. So Martin and I will chat through for a few minutes each theme. And again, questions, comments, do come and join us. So let's start with the topic of trust, ethics, and accountability, Martin. How do we stop AI from becoming a black box that we blindly trust?
I think most people here will actually know the response I'm going to come out here, is that we've got to not see AI as a panacea to all of the errors out there. Yeah. There's so many different models, variations of AI that's out there, different chatbots, and you'll hear a lot of different terminology. What we've actually got to realize and start to do with AI is to use interpretable models, yeah,
Yeah,
and partner with it rather than making that our go-to our solution. Not all of the AIs are natural learning or deep learning systems. They all vary across the market. So when we use the AI, it's very global. And obviously, like we said, is that everybody's got issues with regards to trust and ethics about it. But I think what I'm going to say, and those who know me have heard me say this time and time again, it's got to be human in the loop. Yeah, it's
yeah,
got to be human orientated. We've got to set its boundaries. We've got to understand and create transparency in place, and we've got to audit it. Now, for those in the health and safety game, I'm not saying anything new there with regards to how we deal with different issues without businesses. And what I'm trying to say here today is that we don't trust it blindly. We treat it like we do all other systems.
yeah. It's a really important point that all of these certainly thinking about large language models, which is where I think most people's minds go to on AI since the advent of ChatGPT and other models. They're all very different. They all have kind of different personalities. Some are better at asking questions in different arenas. Some are better at producing different types of outputs. They all have their quirks. So yeah, you've got to really know and understand them, just like any other member of the team, I suppose. You sort of think of them as almost like a super smart intern who's indefatigable. Is that right? Indefatigable. Doesn't get tired.
Yeah.
Um, pretty smart about all sorts of things, but it doesn't mean that they're perfect and they won't have flaws.
No, no. Just a quick one on that is the AI that you bump into, be it ChatGPT, Copilot, DeepSeek, or whatever, they're actual bots, and you can get involved with them and change their tone and change their actions and change how they respond. And a lot of the people that use off-the-shelf AI are getting a black box solution, so to speak. And this is one of the core errors that I find within AI is that people have got to realize that it's a tool, and that tool can be sharpened and it can be used correctly or it can be used incorrectly.
Yeah, yeah. So if we're taking decisions based on algorithms, who is accountable for that, or who should be accountable for that?
It's a simple answer, and I think everybody here knows the person using it's accountable for AI. Okay. Do the vendors carry a little bit of responsibility? They could share an element of it based on what they've actually sold and promised the system can do. But what I will say to you is that if you ever end up in court, do not take your laptop and put it on the counter and say, "Here, boss, this thing guided me this direction," because there is no shared blame in court. Yeah, it's down
Yeah,
to purely the user.
yeah, yeah. Definitely agree with that. Just like reading a book, you've got to interpret it, or reading any guidance, you've got to interpret it and make your own informed decision. Um, what's the thinking about sort of the ethical considerations here? What's the balance between monitoring for safety using AI and respecting people's privacy? So I'm thinking here about, I suppose, CCTV would be one example where you can use AI to monitor things that are happening on CCTV systems.
Yeah, there's a whole raft, isn't there? There's
Yeah,
the video monitoring, there's the wearables, there's whole different bits and pieces. I think what we've got to put into place here and quite clearly is to make sure that the use of AI is proportionate. Yeah.
yeah,
With it being proportionate, it's also got to be transparent, and that transparency has got to be shared with those in which the systems are being used. And I think the final term that I'm going to use here is it's got to be fair. Yeah. I've seen a lot on LinkedIn and different tools where people are monitoring operatives at desks and things like that. Now, is that proportionate? Is that fair? Do they actually know that's happening? So those are your standard ethical questions that when you're implementing AI into the workplace, that they're generally covered.
yeah, yeah. No different than any other kind of technology, really. There's that sort of risk of overreach, isn't there?
Yeah.
And yeah, proportionality, the word you use, is really, really key.
Yeah, it's one of those, if you use it rightly, it builds trust. If you use it incorrectly, it burns that trust. And once you burn that
Yeah,
trust, it's very difficult to get it back.
yeah, yeah. That actually leads nicely onto the next kind of bucket of things I wanted to talk about, which was culture and people focused areas. So, how are organizations doing at balancing tech adoption with maintaining a very strong human safety culture? How well are we doing at that?
Not very well. And the key reason for that is that a lot of people misunderstand actually what AI is. AI is actually a mirror. Okay, so it will reflect back to you your beliefs, your ideas, your concepts. So if you put a corporate policy in and you ask it questions around that, it's going to reflect back to you that policy. And that's the one of the issues with regards to AI, and it can be addressed and it can be fixed, but it's not supposed to replace the culture of an organization or drive a culture. It's supposed to be used to amplify those aspects that you're trying to create within your business. It's supposed to reinforce the values, not the behavior. And this is where some people get it mixed up with regards to that. The other thing is that leadership have to walk the talk, so to speak. And it's all well and good of them implementing AI systems into there if that they feel that what they're using is not a cue to them, which it is because it's the entire organization. And the other thing that we seem to find as well that people have a tendency by using the system is to ignore human ritual. Um, and again, I've seen, I'll give a very brief example of what I mean by that human ritual. We've got individuals stood having a cigarette. And we've got an AI camera
Yeah,
there flagging up that the guy's taking his hard hat on and the guy's not wearing his gloves. And you've got all of those algorithms counting how many breaches of not wearing PPE, but it's not taking into consideration the culture of the guys that are sat there having a break, or you're removing your hat because you're sweaty and trying to wipe your forehead. And this is another, the nuance of AI hasn't picked up on that. So if we use it incorrectly and we don't look at all of those different aspects, it's going to give us skewed data and information, and that's going to affect culture.
yeah, yeah. I think with all technology, you have to look at it as an accelerant. I think that was the word you used, and I've used that word before as well. You know, if you're um, wanting to um, automate a process, let's say, um, and you're making the process 10 times faster, if that process is good, then that's great because you're going to accelerate the speed and it's going to be 10 times faster, but still good. Whereas if you're doing a process that's flawed and you do it 10 times faster, then actually you're accelerating the bad stuff, aren't you? Because you're going to have a flawed, poor result and you're just coming out with more and more output of that result that you don't want. So, really important to know that this and all technology is going to sort of multiply, amplify the culture, and all the other things that you're already doing. And that could be good or it could be bad, depending on how well you're doing those things.
Okay. I think one of the things I want to say is just by moving on that addresses a little bit about the next question is about how do you get buy-in from people? And
Yeah.
you alluded to what you're saying there is that if it's a good, it amplifies it. But there's sometimes huge disconnect between what the senior leadership team think is a good output and what actually happens in the field. And sometimes that disconnect can cause major issues within the culture and the adaptation of AI within that system. So how's the best to sort of approach it? Now, again, I'm
Mm.
a safety professional. I use these approach by implementing health and safety, and the implementation of AI is actually very, very similar. You've got to co-design the process and the system. It's not got to come from the leadership. It's got to come
Yeah.
from both arenas, the middle management and the guys in the coal phase, and even driving that
Yeah.
from the bottom up. Yeah, you've got to answer one fundamental question for the individual that's utilizing AI on the coal face, so to speak, and that is, what's in it for me? Does it speed it up? Does it make it more difficult? And I know you just alluded to that. Yeah.
Mm.
The other thing we have to really avoid is making them feel is that it's Big Brother watching. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got to educate them to feel that the systems are in place or fail safe. It's like a mate that's there to help you. And again, this is all about the communication on how you implement AI into the system. Yeah. Um, don't use buzzwords. Avoid AI predictive modeling and all of these terminologies. Great for the boardroom. Take it onto the cold face, and you will get wiry looks left, right, and centre. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and another key one as well. When it fails, share the failure. Show the individuals that, again, this is not the panacea, to go back to my earlier statement, but it shows them what it can and cannot do, and it's there to support and help them rather than monitor and watch.
Yeah, all very, very good advice there, Martin. So thank you for that. Um, if we're leveraging tech and we're making safety smarter, should we say? Um, Going back to that sort of workforce point, how do we make sure that the workforce keeps up with the skills that they need to leverage this technology?
That's an interesting one there, because one of the things that I've actually found when we've been implementing AI into systems is that some of the pilots that they've used have not been driven with intent. And we'll cover that in later detail and what I mean by that. But sometimes what we have to do is train beyond the tool, not just how to use the tool, but why the tool's there, what it gives us, how it helps
Yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then we've got to document and communicate it. And communication, I think every business here will say that communication, it's all about the communicator, isn't it, rather than the
Yeah.
person who's receiving it. So when you're using the safety systems to make it smarter, pilot with intent, train beyond and why, and document and communicate that with everybody, especially the people on the coal face. And again, there's that heavy leading with me being health and safety. I know that there's the senior management and the team, and we're going to go on to ROIs, etc., shortly. But
Yeah,
the implementation AI, by its design, is to be seen as supporting those in the field.
yeah, definitely, definitely. As a reminder, any comments, questions, if you want to come and share your experiences, your views, or ask a question to Martin and I, then please do that. So let's move on now to thinking about the kind of practicality and, as you just alluded to, the ROI, the usefulness of these technologies. So it's very busy, isn't it, and very noisy in this space. So how does a safety leader decide what's actually worth investing time, money, and effort into, and what isn't?
Right. I'm going to allude back to a standard business model that most people are aware of. We want to fix people's pain. You want to find a solution to their pain. Um, so one of the things we've got is that when we've got business leaders looking to invest in AI, sometimes they're driven by the pitch, the sale. And that's where we've got somebody coming in and saying, oh, we can do all of this, we can save you X, Y, Z. But what they have a tendency to ignore is, what is it actually fixing? What pain is it removing?
Yeah,
What specific issue are we looking at? Yeah. Does it reduce time, reduce risk, improve compliance? Yeah. And is it the usability for the people that are going to use it? And I've come across this time and time again when saying, Martin, how can you help? How can I use AI in my business? And it's a simple question that's saying, where's your biggest pain point? Yeah, look at that first, and then build around your compliance, your metrics, your training, and everything to get that there. So before you start investing time, I'm going to say a very obvious thing as a business: know where your pain points are.
yeah, yeah. And I think that is the challenge of lots of different technologies, isn't it? You know, there's the sort of shiny object syndrome, and it sounds great to go and do that. You know, I think we're all guilty of shiny object syndrome now and again, aren't we?
It's pain
Uh,
over pitch, isn't it? Pain over.
yeah, yeah, but it's actually right taking that step back, looking at it strategically, um, and thinking, yeah, what's actually going to be useful. So, I mean, where would you advise people to start? Would you think about maybe incident rates or costs or time that they're currently using, or how would you sort of go about the framework of where to think about this first?
I would always aim and look at very small scale trials.
Yeah,
Okay. Ask the blunt questions, watch how people interact with it, and then see if you can get meaningful metrics. Okay. So if you're not actually working through that process, the information you're going to get back is not necessarily going to be of any significant use. I've got an example in mind here with regards to metrics that I was going to cover later on, but I'll bring it in now. I was working with
Yeah.
an organization that had 10 years worth of accident data. And I asked them about this data, and they went, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We've had X, Y, this, Z, that, and one thing and another." And I've gone, "Well, what have you implemented? What have you learned from it?" And the key question that they came back to was, "Oh, the young and keep and hurt themselves, and is that the new starters?" And they're like, "Yes." And I goes, "But beyond that, how deeper can you go?" And we took AI and we put all of this 10 years worth, obviously redacted. We took out
Yeah.
names and things like that. We put all of that information into the system, and it flagged out quite clearly that over 40% of its accidents were minor hand-related accidents. And I just looked at them and I goes, "What have you done about that?" And they're like,
Mm.
"Well, it's just cuts and nips." And I'm like, "Yeah, but that data." So we then used AI to extrapolate all of the information and started a training program to go forward. Now, that was nice, easy, simple, small scale, manageable. And we could actually see the metrics because then we could measure, have we had any further incidents from that? Now,
Yeah.
that's on the very, very small scale. Now, you can enlarge that, obviously, for the senior management team, especially if there's a larger organization.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I did something similar with a housing association. So we got their slip strips and falls data for many years, and they sort of asked me, what can we learn from this, and I leveraged a couple of different large language models, put all the data through, and with the right sort of prompts, came out with some quite useful insights, and that enabled them to be very focused on the next phase of what they could do to try and mitigate that risk. So yeah,
Oh,
absolutely putting data in and getting some insights out. If you know the right questions to ask,
well,
it could be a good starting point.
that's something I would like to sort of move on to is we alluded there's been multiple different systems out there. I do not use just one system. I use three. And what I actually do is that we talked about prompt engineering, asking the right questions, and I thought that's key. How many people, always surprises me, don't ask the AI how to ask the right question? And it
Yeah,
seems very intuitive that you can actually ask AI to, how should I ask this question? Once you've got that in place, you can put it into a different model and ask it the same. And it's a bit like you're going down and you're in a meeting and you've got three or four colleagues there and you're bouncing off ideas off each other. Rather than just taking AI at face value, you can utilize other systems and information to get the correct answer.
yeah, yeah. Let us know, those of you on the call that's in the chat. How are you currently using AI? Have you started using some of these large language models such as ChatGPT within the realm of safety, for example? So Martin, there's obviously a huge amount of data out there within the realms in which we're working. Are we actually getting better safety outcomes thanks to all of this data, or is that something that we're still not quite leveraging the data well enough yet?
This is a strange one, and I'm only going to go from my overview and experience from it. Health and safety individuals aren't data analysts. Okay,
Correct.
they're never signed up to it. Your data analyst is usually potentially your financial director or the head of finances is heavily into data. And when you start taking that analytical approach on safety data, you can get a lot of really valuable information. But if that information is not shared and turned into something that's actually practical, yeah, it's not being utilized. And I've found that so much safety data that's correlated and collected is, though it's been analyzed, and they've found and seen trends, they've not been able to drive that knowledge and information back down the chain to share that education. And so, yeah, data. We've got the data, we analyze it, we don't necessarily share it with the right people, or we've got the individuals that don't know how to manage that data as well. Now, with a
Yeah.
bit of training and a bit of guidance using artificial intelligence, and again, making sure the individuals are trained on that, we can start using that data and looking for patterns.
Yeah, I think there's an expression used, isn't there? And people may have heard me say this before, um, that data is the new oil. And sometimes people take from that that data is really valuable. But actually, I think they sometimes miss the point. Oil itself isn't valuable. It's only valuable once it's been refined. And data isn't, it's on its own right, isn't necessarily valuable. It's all about how can we analyze the data and get the insights from the data, and then that's when it has the value. So I think I would echo that there's a huge amount of data out there. I don't think we're yet quite on top of that enough to get the full benefit of it.
Yeah, I think it's not of any use if we can't measure it and make it useful. So why
Yeah,
collect the data if we can't use it? We come very blind to patterns. I know we're supposed to be very good at recognizing patterns, but we come very blind to it when you've got a large amount of data. And again, there's the old, I'm not going to say it, or there's the temptation, poor data in is going to give you poor data out.
yeah,
And I know there's other expressions one can use out there for it, but I have seen a lot of information we're correlating and collecting that has little or no use to what we're trying to achieve. And that takes us to the full cycle, doesn't it? What's the pain, what we're looking to achieve?
yeah, yeah. Now, speaking of pain, obviously the last few years have been quite um, challenging from a sort of financial perspective for individuals and for businesses. So, a couple of questions regarding that. I suppose, firstly, what's the return on investment for this technology, AI, and other safety technology, given budgets tightening and so on and so forth? And then I suppose the second question would be, is this accessible to an SME, or do you need to have that big budget of a large enterprise?
I'll try and answer both of those together for you. Here's a strange anomaly with regards to health and safety, and that's obviously my field that I'm looking at in the AI. When we look at return on investments, we're looking at reduced accidents, faster audits, less admin time, fewer non-conformities, retention, safety culture. Yeah. And not only that, it's also about these things not happening. So that makes it very difficult to turn it into the financial numbers that a financial director wants to see. And,
Yeah.
and for those in the world of health and safety, we all know that. How do you prove your worth? You prove your worth by making things not happen. And that's a difficult one. But if again you look at historical data, costs and time associated with incidents, accidents, inspections, and audits, turn that into a monetary value, you can then show that moving forward as a return on investment. There's, I know I'm sounding a bit grey there, but it is quite in the world of health and safety. It is quite difficult because we're talking about stopping things happening rather than the things that actually have happened. For smaller businesses, they don't have that vast amount of data. But what they do have by being able to use AI is that they don't need a large package. Yeah, they
Yeah.
can use standard off-the-shelf modular pricing. So you talk to an organization, you don't have to take the entire package. Take what's pertinent to you. And because there's so many different AI models out there, there's no huge cost expense in working with them. Ask for your free trials. Yeah. Look for support rather than features. Yeah. Because they love to sell you all of the features, but what you actually need is the support in understanding how to use it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid of open source because they're a good option of being able to work with you to develop something that's unique to your business. Yeah. And work with people that know the tech and understand your pain. Yeah. And I say that quite categorically because that's what I do is work with organizations to help them recognize it and show them the systems that can help them address it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who are interested in thinking about calculating ROI, upcoming on the podcast will be an interview with a guy called Ben Cooney, who's a risk manager. So he and he's worked for some very big organizations, and we speak quite a lot of depth actually about how do you calculate risk and how do you quantify some of these other things that Martin just alluded to. So do look out for that coming up on the podcast soon. Let's talk a bit more about risk then, regulation, and reliability. So, um, are there any examples where implementing new safety related technology has actually increased risk that you can think of?
There's actually a number of stories that are floating around the system and where it highlights that AI has become a problem. So I've tried to group it down rather than talking about specifics, about the general concept that creates it. So I think the first one is the over reliance of automated monitoring. And
Yeah.
what we actually find with over reliance on that monitoring is that when people are under pressure, they will then start to rely on the automated systems. And we all know when you start relying on automated systems, some of the failures can be quite catastrophic. And there is evidence out there in the field where automation monitoring has been ignored due to whatever reason, and that has failed quite categorically. Wearables, yeah, wearables triggering distraction, yeah, or you're trying to focus on something on your wearables kicking off to say that this is a hazard, and you're losing focus, so
Mm, mm.
consequently creating a hazard in its own sense. We've got incorrect data. A typical example of that is heater sensors kicking off, feeling that there is an increase in heat when there hasn't been. And so consequently, the damage that that has caused through the failure of systems. So when you start bolting these into AI, you can get false positives, yeah,
Mm.
and false negatives. And
Yes.
that's the nature. And so this is why I'll go right the way back to the loop. It's about keeping humans in the loop, working with this technology. Yes, it can save time. Yes, it can save money, but it can also implement and create issues if not correctly managed.
Yeah. Yeah. But just on that point, Martin, one of the things that I suppose the scaremongers around AI would say is, we're going to lose all these jobs and it's going to take over from humans and humans are going to be replaced. And I mean, where do you sort of stand on that?
I've got numerous stories, but one of my favorites is reverting back to the fact is that when we took out the steam engines and brought in electricity,
Yeah.
people screamed. When computers hit our desks, people screamed, it's going to lose jobs. It's going to change our jobs. It's going to change how we react and how we operate. And if we go back to the electric or the computer, or there's numerous elements of it through history, we adapt and we change. Some typing pool ladies were really upset when computers came in. But now they're all working with computers. So, yes, I understand the fear that AI is going to potentially take people's jobs. But what it cannot take is that human intuity, that human knowledge, that human creativity. And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
that joining of the two of human creativity and AI that's going to create a whole raft of new areas for us to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm on board with you on that, but yeah, I just wanted you to have the opportunity to say so. Um, Thinking about the sort of regulatory and legal position, are we keeping up with this? It strikes me as being very, very difficult for governments to keep up pace with all of these changes, particularly in the field of AI. If you consider how long it takes to get an act through Parliament, for example, versus the seismic shifts and improvements you see in these models every few weeks.
The regulations and framework are nowhere near. What they do have a tendency to be doing at the moment is relying on people's fear of privacy and GDPR and things like that. Now, they're valid concerns, but when you actually look at specific safety critical environments, and how we monitor equipment, the frequencies, and the associated regulations and guidance notes that go with that, are not there. And so a lot of people are using this technology, looking at legislation and thinking, well, that's not necessarily helped me. And they're creating their own policies. Okay, so in that guise, it's creating a whole huge of issue. Again, we've alluded to privacy, but here's another one. Employers are not sure about their liability with regards to AI-driven decisions as well. Okay, so we talked before about you and me using AI. We're held specifically accountable for that. Where does that responsibility lie from an employer or an organization's point of view? And the legislation's not caught up with that yet. So there's a bit of concern, but it's not keeping up. And because the AI is moving so much quicker than legislation can.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of comments in the chat here. Ed uses AI as a trigger for added valuable information, collaborate with real people, but then ask the AI if we've missed anything, sometimes get some aha moments. Definitely, I would echo that. Damien's saying here using it for data analytics rather than, say, pivot tables, summarizing documents. So yeah, I think some very practical ways that we can already be using.
Yeah,
Be using
I
this.
am
I
going
did a
to.
session actually. Go on, Martin.
Now, I am going to say this. If you go down to the pub with a mate, yeah, and the mate is all knowing, do you trust everything he says? Okay. No, you don't. So don't do the same with AI. But here's a clitcher. Yeah. If you go down to your pub and your mate sat there with the Encyclopedia Britannica, for those who are old enough to remember the Encyclopedia Britannica, and you're asking a question and he's opening it up and he's going, oh, yeah, page 426, this, that, and the other. Yeah. Do you still trust him? Or do you go and get your own Encyclopedia Britannica and cross-reference it? That's what I'm alluding to about AI. Yeah,
Mm.
is ask it to check itself, get it to question itself, and use other systems to question responses as well. Don't trust it blindly. Use your own intuition and intuity to check that what the information you've got is correct. And
Yeah.
that's your professional oversight that I think hopefully throughout what we've said here, I've alluded to. Use professionals in your industry using the tech to get the responses that will help you.
Here, yes, definitely need to be doing that one. Um, so we just spoke about a bit of a gap in terms of legislation. What about the time or the lag, I suppose, between the all the innovation that's happening and then implementation? So what's that? What is that gap, and how are we bridging that?
The truth is nobody really understands because I mean I've been working with AI now for a couple of years, and if I compare what it was when I first got involved with it to the bespoke chat models I've got now and the different agencies that I'm in place with, it's absolutely huge. I don't know what's going to happen in 3 months' time. Yeah. And if we're in the industry and we're living and breathing the AI and bringing it into place, and we don't know what's going to happen in 3 months' time, how can you bring legislation in place to manage it? And
Yeah,
so I'm with them. Don't get me wrong, there's some good, insightful sites and groups out there, but unfortunately, they're being more driven by people's fear than they are the actual working tools that we can use in industry.
yeah, yeah. I suppose if you're in a big organization and you kind of maybe invested in your own large language model, which I know some law firms and consulting firms have, I suppose you've got the resources to have a team of people to be monitoring these changes and quickly reacting to changes and innovations and so on and so forth. If you're in a smaller organization or if you're sort of trying to leverage some of this technology for yourself and maybe not alongside the full weight of the organization, then you need to be just very nimble and mindful of what's going on. And I suppose maybe also going back to that shiny object syndrome, not maybe jumping on every single new development, but just sort of sticking with what you've got.
And expanding and building what you've got. I mean, I'll use very quickly. I've got one eye on my clock here with regards to the systems that we use. I reference a lot of legislation. Now, I could go onto the internet and reference that legislation, but I don't. I download the legislation into my own data set. I then use my model to reference that data set. Now, there's another nuance that many people might not know with regards to AI is that there's something they call a temperature setting. And what they mean by a temperature setting is that 10, it will create a wild science fiction story, and 1, it will only physically regurgitate the text that you've given it. Now, when we look at the field models out there, your Chat GPTs, your Claude, your AI Copilot, and things like that, their temperature is set between 3 and 5. And that allows for creativity. And it's that creativity that gets things wrong. Okay.
Mm,
So when you're working with an AI model, an open model, not your own model that you've set up, because the complexities associated with that, always bear that in mind that there's always that element of creativity. Now, if you're a law firm, you are going to tone that down. It's going to cite pure legislation, but you're going to have AI individuals, and you don't need high level coders to be able to do it, but somebody with a bit of knowledge to be able to set that up and store the data and make sure that the data is kept up to date.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Some more good advice there, Martin. Thank you. Um, last few questions, and then anybody else that has got any questions, feel free to come in either in the chat or if you're on Zoom, go to reactions, raise your hand, and you can come and ask a question as well. An impression that I've got is that a lot of safety technology seems to be kind of stuck in pilot mode. Firstly, is that fair? And secondly, if it is fair, why is that? What's causing it?
Right. The gap between real world implementation and bridging it. I think what we've actually got going on is that we talked about shiny things. People like to overly complex the situation. And when you complicate it, people have a tendency to be concerned by its outcomes. And what we've actually got is that a lot of these systems are built in labs, not in the field. So you get a fantastic gadget, it works fantastic in the lab, you take it out into the field and it falls over. And then when you look at the cost implications of that, you've got that failure. Okay.
Yeah,
There's also a lack of relevant context and how different tools are integrated. So it's great having a wearable. I can download all of the data. I've got a nose monitor. I've got air monitoring systems. I can download that data. But then you're integrating that into a different system, so a different model, and then you've got to write your reports. Then you've got to give it to the people to interpret it. And there's a huge disconnect between the innovation and the implementation. And from a field point of view, I've been in, I said before, in the game for quite some years. I loved it when they brought new, wonderful desktop systems in place. And I'm looking at it and going, looks pretty, but it's of no use to me. It's not giving me the information I need. So there's your base disconnect. It's the relevant context with regards to the tools, its integration. And finally, courage and change fatigue. Yeah.
yeah,
People don't like change. You've got to have courage to move forward into these new areas. and because AI is a software package, it stores zeros and ones, irrespective of what you look at it. Your IT will bring blockers in because of the fear of GDPR and security. So you end up having a lot of detractors from bringing something new in that you're trying to work with.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing, my one observation from me on this point would be that it goes back to your point about the pain. And I think sometimes organizations, developers of software or technology will come up with these great ideas about this technology can do A, B, or C, but is A, B, or C actually aligned to a pain that is relevant and worth solving, and one that people are willing to invest in? I think sometimes there is a bit of a mismatch there, as well. Conscious of time, Martin. So,
Yeah.
what would you say is the one piece of technology that you think is going to have the biggest impact on safety over the next 5 years? Just a couple of quick fire questions to finish
Quick
us off.
questions. When we're talking about technology, we're fundamentally talking about software now. It's not necessarily the physical technology, but the software behind it. And that's alluding to AI. I believe that within the next few years, the AI systems are going to start to be able to interpret human behavior. And I think that is a huge change, that when an AI system can look at a human, watch their behavior and respond to it, that the information that's going to come out is going to be quite it's going to be very valuable. And
Yeah,
yes, I can hear everybody going, "Whoa, hang on, I'm being arrested because AI thinks I'm going to rob something." But they've already got such systems in place and being trialed, and they can pick up on human behavior. And I think once that expands out into the wider field within the work industry, I think that's going to make some huge differences. And again, that behavior is going to be moved into machine near misses and things like that. And a final note, yeah, you're about to do something wrong. There's a voice in your head that basically goes, I wouldn't do that. So you've got your in the field voice command digital assistants. So
yeah,
behavior, digital assistants, bolt that all together. In 5 years, we're going to see some really interesting tech in the field.
yeah. Certainly an exciting and interesting time. That's for sure. Um, just sort of penultimate question, and then I suppose how can we make sure that we don't lose the fundamentals of what safety management is in this kind of rush towards innovation and technology?
Five very simple bullet points. Keep the humans in the loop. Teach principles, not procedures. Audit the culture, not the compliance. Yeah. Codify or manage what matters. Yeah. People by their very nature are unpredictable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Principles have changed. Principles haven't changed, should I say. We educate, we give them awareness and involvement. And that is such a nice one because that's health and safety, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Educate, aware, and involve. And we
yeah,
just adopt those same principles and using AI going forward rather than listening to hype that's in the field.
yeah. Fantastic. And then the last one, Martin, you're obviously involved in helping organizations to get started on this kind of AI journey. So if you were a newbie health and safety professional, somebody in the audience today, for example, where would you sort of, and you never really got involved in AI at all, where would you kind of go as a starting point, maybe three things that you would do first?
Oh, no, you didn't prepare me for this question, Christian. Where does one start? I mean, obviously, there's ourselves. We have not only health and safety, but HR and training knowledge that we can allude to. The idea is, and going right the way back to what I said before, understanding the pain and what you want to fix, and then using the resources around you. And it could be tech specialists, it could be consultants who are embracing AI. Talk to the people around you to understand what solutions are available to fix your pain point. And if we can take anything away from this, is that AI is a fantastic tool for fixing pain points. It's not that good at making money or writing books or doing art. It can
Yeah,
do all of those things, but it's very good at fixing pain points once you know what they are.
fantastic. Well, thanks very much for joining me today, Martin. If people want to get in touch with you, would LinkedIn be the best way to do that?
Yeah, fine. I'm open. I think one of the things I've got on the go at the moment that will appear on my LinkedIn is that I've created a document that helps people to document and record the use of AI whilst they're implementing it. So
Hmm.
if you're creating a document, we say that we should demonstrate openly and clearly that we're using AI. This document is a good tool to help people through the steps. So if you're creating a policy, you could use this document to make sure that, admittedly, we're using AI, but we're making sure that we've got the professional oversight and we're ticking the right boxes.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, perhaps we'll include that link
Okay.
in the show notes when this goes out on the podcast. Well, thanks again, Martin. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot, lots and lots to grapple with on this question, and I'm sure it's a topic that we will return to again on the Safety Roundtable and/or podcast. So, thank you, Martin, and thanks to you for joining Martin and I as well. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks for another.